You know, sometimes I am fascinated and ashamed of just how easy it is to manipulate my gender. Not members of my gender, just my gender. Like, how can I explain this to you? I like watching football, and football season is about to start, and I just know what type of advertisers are going to be playing whenever I sit down to watch a game.
Hey, you're an average old male, right? Well, guess what? If you use our deodorant, you'll turn into a modern-day Adonis. Also remember, bars are full of judgmental assholes that will shame you for being different in any way. To avoid this sad fate, drink this particular brand of light beer.
And as ridiculous as those advertisements might be, they keep on showing up on TV, which must mean that marketers think that they work, which is probably because they do work. And it goes to show you that apparently guys can have their attention held really easily just by appealing to their sexuality and their machismo.
And this is why fan service is so prevalent in shonen and seinen manga. Sex sells. Now, I'm not against the use of fan service in manga, even if it can be incredibly shameless at times. However, if a series is devoid of entertainment value outside of its use of fan service and becomes popular exclusively because of it, that's where I have a problem. It just seems like a waste to me. If you're going to read a series that consists of nothing but filler until you get to the coveted pinup pages, why don't you just buy a goddamn pinup calendar?
And one of the most egregious examples of this in the past decade has been To Love Ru.
To Love Ru debuted in Weekly Shonen Jump in 2006, authored by Hasemi Saki and illustrated by Yabuki Kentaro, who had previously worked together on Yabuki's series Black Cat. For 3.5 years, To Love Ru was the magazine's most prominent romantic comedy title, and it was quite successful throughout its entire run. The plot,
such as it's called,
focuses on Yuki Rito, an ordinary high school student who tries to get through life without troubling anyone. He harbors a secret crush on his childhood friend Sairenji Haruna, but he just can't work up the nerve to make a move on her, even though she feels the same way. Everything changes in one of the series' iconic scenes when a mysterious naked girl teleports right on top of Rito as he's taking a bath. The girl, it turns out, is the princess of a faraway world, Lala Satalin Deviluk, and she's run away from home to escape the prospect of an arranged marriage. Rito quickly ends up being drawn to Lala's attempts to resist returning home, and through a sequence of unlikely events she decides to stay on Earth permanently, naming Rito her fiancé in the process.
And that's really all the background information you need. After that, you can probably pick any chapter at random to start reading from, and you should be able to follow what's going on.
You see, although there is definitely a continuity running throughout the entire manga, To Love Ru mostly follows an episodic format. Aside from potentially lacking familiarity with the newer members of the cast, there's not really much of a reason not to skip around to random points in the series. And even if you do jump to a point in the story that focuses on a character you haven't been introduced to properly yet, they're also archetypical that it doesn't really matter, you'll figure out what their deal is quickly enough. You've got the super disciplinarian class rep who's tsundere for the hero, the cold-hearted alien bounty hunter who slowly starts to warm up to the hero's younger yet infinitely more mature sister, the aloof older woman who finds the hero's antics amusing, the classmates who sexually harass their best friend.
Which you'd think would have some sort of negative effect on their friendship, but of course it doesn't.
The stuck-up rich girl and her cronies, the nearly identical twins who have completely opposite views of the hero. Even the main characters are incredibly simplistic and unmemorable. Lala's the outspoken and exotic stranger, Haruna's the introverted girl next door, and of course they've both got a crush on Rito, who's a generally nice guy, but not really the type you'd suspect to be the most charismatic man in the universe. Somehow Rito manages to get on the good side of every female character he meets, and inevitably they harbor at least a modicum of romantic interest in him. It's not even like he's some Casanova lady killer either. All this just sort of happens to him because he's such a nice guy. The series starts off with a love triangle, but it doesn't take very long for more love interests for Rito to start popping up everywhere. And by the time To Love Ru ended, it was a full-fledged harem series. And harem series are fucking boring.
You can make a dramatic and compelling story about the romance between two characters. You can make a dramatic and compelling story about a love triangle, or even a far larger and more complicated web of interconnected romantic interests that come into conflict with one another. But if you take one character and make them the focal point of that entire situation, and then go out of your way to remove any sense of conflict from that situation, which realistically would be impossible, then it can't be anything other than an immature fantasy. It's just wish fulfillment.
After a certain point in the story, it really feels like there's nothing at stake. I mean, all the girls get along with one another pretty well. Some of them even outright support each other in their pursuit of a relationship with Rito. There's not even the standard harem series indecisive protagonist excuse of, I can't pick one girl because it would upset all the other girls. In fairness, Rito's inability to make a decision is because of his own shyness and ignorance of just how strongly some of the girls feel for him, and that makes a lot of sense. The problem with this is that there's not really a sense of dilemma for readers to latch onto. The most we get is if he chooses to be with Lala or Haruna, then he'll marry one of them and be surrounded by a bunch of other absurdly good-looking young women who are all attracted to him by varying degrees, and if he doesn't, he'll still be surrounded by a bunch of absurdly good-looking young women who are all attracted to him by varying degrees.
Oh, dude, that sucks. My heart goes out to you.
On the other hand, Telovru isn't really concerned with developing tension in his plot. In fact, it seems quite content with having a bunch of zany one-off stories that involve a bunch of slapstick and partial nudity. The trouble is that these get very repetitive because they invariably boil down to Rito accidentally landing in situations where he looks like a crazed pervert and being severely beaten over the misunderstanding. The only other joke in Hasemi's arsenal seems to be having the unnamed principal of their school be severely beaten for being an actual crazed pervert. The fact that this guy still has a job is at once amazing and horrifying.
But, in spite of everything, the predictable and repetitive plots, the bland characters, the shameless fan service, I can't really bring myself to call Telovru a bad series.
It's very obvious why the series got as popular as it did. It gave its audience exactly what they wanted, and it never pretended to be something it wasn't. Everything feels very consistent with Telovru. It's always lighthearted and irreverent, and it seems like the creators understood that they should keep it that way. It never reaches for unachievable goals, and thus it never falls on its face, and so while nothing stands out as especially enjoyable about it, nothing stands out to make it wretched either. It just doesn't have anything to offer you unless you specifically seek it out knowing what type of a series it is, in which case you probably can't go wrong with it.
This is probably going to sound weird, but I almost feel as if Telovru serves an essential function to the manga world. Like, we need the example it provides for the type of series it is, regardless of how enjoyable it is.
To me, the most interesting thing about Telovru is actually the real-life reason it was cancelled. I can't really be certain if this is exactly what happened, given that the only English sources available regarding the matter are various forum posts. But the story goes that Kentaro Yabuki's now ex-wife, Shiho Kashiwagi, cheated on him with an underage man, abandoned him twice, stole a large sum of money from his credit card accounts, and then demanded a divorce, all within the span of a couple months. During this time, she essentially held their daughter ransom and demanded more money in exchange for the girl's custody, and even that she be granted all rights to Sairenji Haruna based on the fact that she was the inspiration for the character.
You know, before anyone knew she was a two-timing hell bitch.
The whole thing would have probably worked out legally in Kentaro's favor, but he was worried that the situation would be harmful to their then 3-year-old daughter, so instead he buckled to Shiho's demands, and although he now has sole custody of his daughter, he and Hisame were forced to significantly reduce Haruna's role in the series. A few months later, the series ended altogether because Kentaro simply couldn't handle the load of drawing a weekly manga while also raising his daughter by himself. Fortunately for Hasemi and Yabuki, they were able to resurrect the series a couple of years later in the form of Telovru Darkness, which now runs monthly in Jump Square.
And that's a whole different monster.
Telovru Darkness feels more like a spin-off than a true sequel. It features the same cast and carries on with the same perverted spirit as the original series, but Darkness focuses on different characters, takes full advantage of Jump Square's looser censorship standards, and true to its name has a somewhat darker tone. Lala and of course Haruna are demoted to supporting characters, while Lala's younger sister Momo and former bounty hunter Kanjiki no Yami take their place as the two most prominent female characters in the series. Because of this, there's much more of a sense of purpose to the plot, since Momo and Yami actually have goals outside of screwing around all the time. Yami's past acquaintances appear to provide actual villains and conflict, but bizarrely enough, the main focus of the series is Momo and her plan to... make every female character in the series fall in love with Rito and make him the king of the harem. It's kind of awesome. Here's this character with such an outlandish motivation that she would ordinarily be a one-note side character, who in fact was a side character originally, and now she's front and center in the spotlight, and everything revolves around this plot of hers which comes straight out of a porno. And at times, Darkness really seems borderline pornographic, what with all the imagined sex scenes and nipple shots. Good God, so many nipple shots!
You can tell in comparing the two series that Darkness lost a lot of the sense of almost purity that the original series had. There's a lot more to the new series, and thus there's more to like, but it's kind of outbalanced by the fact that there's a lot more to hate.
Despite being a more interesting series overall, Telovru Darkness can reach some pretty uncomfortable levels with how explicit the fan service is. Although there's some dramatic character interaction to be found, it actually seems to work against the series as a whole, because now it's asking you to take it a bit more seriously than you did before, just as it's getting even more ridiculous and smutty. Unless you try out Telovru and find that you really like it, don't even bother with Darkness.
Telovru is far from essential reading, and really there's not a lot of merit to it, But even at its worst, it's pretty harmless. Even so, if you're thinking about checking it out, why not just buy a pinup calendar? Seriously. I'm our ruler of time. Until next time, forget what they taught you in school. Always read right to left.
Hey! Womanizer, womanizer, you're a womanizer. Oh, womanizer, oh, you're a womanizer, baby. You are. You are. Womanizer, womanizer, womanizer. Womanizer. Boy, don't try to front. I know just what you are. Boy, don't try to front. I know just what you are. You say I'm crazy. I've got your crazy. You're nothing but a woman.